Guys, welcome to the final episode of Series 2 of Tech Recruitment Training. I'm Dale, your host. I think most of you who are fans of the show will be familiar with the lineup we've got today. As always, I'm joined by Phil and Darren, who are going to walk us through the topic today, which deep dive into AI or artificial engineers. We are going to give people a few moments just to dial in as it's lunchtime, and then we'll get cracking. But do feel free to get your questions or comments in early if you want to get them into the guys to answer through the course of the session. So we've got some people dialed in already. But okay. So guys, where are we up to on series, be it Netflix or other streaming services that are also available to the greater recruiting public?
I'm not watching anything at the moment. I watched loads of football at the weekend, but football's finished now. So, well, it's finished for a week, and then it's back. But I'm not watching any series at the moment, so I can't really comment too much.
Right, Phil?
Same here, to be honest. No, what
are you both footy widows?
I've been rereading *Sapiens*, which has been fun. But yeah, that's pretty much taken up most of my spare time. And then the author of *Sapiens* got a third one in the series, so I'm going to reread the second as well, and then get a third. But yeah,
I've literally never heard of that before. What is
*Sapiens*?
Yeah,
it's really good. It's like about anthropology kind of thing, like the human journey, but then all the modern stuff as well. I'd recommend it. Very good.
Interesting. Okay. I never know how long we should wait before starting these. The first minute is always awkward. I'm just sat it up. Don't really know what to say.
Yeah, I think we can do the intro bit and let people
kick off. So
yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so for anyone who's just dialed in, this is episode 6, with the final of series 2 of our tech recruitment training, and the final episode is going to be about AI or artificial intelligence engineering or engineers. And Darren's going to walk us through this, and we're also joined as ever by Phil. But we are going to kick things off now. I think just a reminder that you can also follow up with more questions if they occur to you after the session on our Slack group, or if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're live in the session right now, please put your comments or questions into all participants. That means everyone gets to view them as we go. Bit redundant now, but we do send out these webinar calendar holders each week, and if you've enjoyed the series, don't forget to tell your friends. They can do catch up on YouTube, shout us out on Twitter or LinkedIn, and if you want to use the hashtag TRT or hashtag Tech Recruitment Training, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Just to recap, that we're now on 6 of 6, and so we're now on AI engineers. And so I think this might be the moment to hand over to Darren to walk us through the session today. Darren.
I forget to take it off of every session that we've done. We won't be going through the interview process, because I think having gone through it a few times, people know the interview process at this point. So what we'll be going through is what is AI, to do a bit of a recap from a session from about 2 months ago. Deconstruction of the tech, deconstruction of the skills, and then deconstruction of the experience and salary. And I think the first one will be quite interesting, because I'll be debunking some of the considerations for what people think AI is, because AI is not what Hollywood makes it sound like.
Well, I think you've led us into the next slide then. So, as you say, I think when people talk about AI, they very much think about the Terminator or other sort of like quite dystopian visions of the future. But what's the reality then, Darren?
Yeah, so when people think AI so it's important when you're talking about AI, less so in recruitment, because I would hope that an AI engineer won't be talking about Terminators, but I would always, when talking about AI, get a bit of perspective for what are they talking about? Are they talking about Hollywood AI, which is like androids and sentient beings, or are they talking about actual AI? And what we're talking about from an AI perspective is a computer that, using information it's received before, making decisions. So no matter where we are right now, and there's some, so the example on the right-hand side is IBM Watson. That was on Jeopardy and won Jeopardy. But it didn't win it by having a little brain in its system. It won it by utilizing information that it is received over the series of going through many episodes of Jeopardy and understanding what is the likely outcomes, rather than it having a brain and making its own decisions. So IBM Watson on Jeopardy is probably the best example that people have seen in the mainstream for AI working at the moment.
And we've also seen that kind of technology also working in chess, and I think most famously is quite famous.
We'll go on to AlphaGo.
Netflix series. Sorry, I'm going to steal some of your thunder that's coming up. So let's move on. So, brief history of data science, and talk us through this, please.
Yeah. So data science, so AI is a subset of computer science. And data science is a subset of computer science. So they're all a subset of no, not a subset of each other. Data science to computer science, and then AI to data science. So this takes us through data science, but from an AI perspective, it's that right-hand side that is going to be the most interesting. So as we move towards a internet focused world with the .com bubble, you saw companies like Netflix and Amazon utilizing AI, and as the years go on, you'll see better and better. So like Spotify do it as well. I'll have a Spotify example later. But AI from that perspective, or machine learning, which is a subset of AI, is utilizing the information input from the users. So if you're going onto Netflix and you're watching, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you're watching Tiger King, you will start getting examples that are similar to Tiger King, although there's not really anything like Tiger King on Netflix at the moment. They will start looking at the behavior that it's seeing from you when you go on and utilize the system to understand what is the likely behavior that you'll have in the future. So it's learning from your actions. So the same with kind of Uber and Airbnb, and as you'll see, the 2015s, although we're way past that now, is where we started to see AI and machine learning really take advantage.
Cool. And I think the thing to add here is like the development of this science has gone somewhat hand in hand in the data engineering capability. So if you want to look back, they'll see some of these references come up over and over again. But you can go back and look at our data engineering episode to see the other side of this equation. So
yeah,
really interesting evolution here. So I think we're going to come back to some of this.
Cloud computing as well. I think if you look at the same timeline for cloud computing, the milestones are pretty much the same as your computing power and your memory access kind of increased massively.
Great. So talk through this slide, Darren, as well, please.
Yeah, so I guess this is summing up the previous slides, but essentially AI is a broad branch of computer science. So when you think traditional software engineers, these guys are just another subset of that software engineering. So in some veins, it's similar to how a front-end developer isn't the same as a back-end developer, although you get full stack more now. So they're utilizing a different part of the technology ecosystem. So the goal of AI is to create systems that can operate intelligently and independently. So over time, it will mean similar to what people are doing from a DevOps perspective. It will mean that there's less need for human interaction within the systems. So I always used to, because I used to do data science as an area in previous businesses. And what I always laughed about with candidates was essentially what they are doing is putting themselves out of a job. Because the more they put AI forward and more machine learning becomes a thing, they're having to change what they're doing in order to innovate. But I guess that's the same with all technology. The more you innovate, the more certain manual tasks aren't needed anymore. And then it's powered by algorithms using various kind of different techniques that we'll go through in a second.
Cool. And so talk us through the different types of AI so we understand how to differentiate them.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different types of AI. There's narrow AI, which is essentially machines that are goal-orientated and perform a specific task. So what AlphaGo is, if you don't know what AlphaGo is AlphaGo was a computer that was the first computer to beat someone in Go, which is a board game. And then over time, you've seen that stuff like drafts or checkers and chess has also been games that have been beaten by AI systems. And people always think that that's just by chance that a computer's decided that it wants to be a chess master. It's not by chance. If you think about chess online, I'm sure at some point, even for people that aren't that interested in chess, you've probably played a game on your browser that's chess based. And what happened with IBM Watson and AlphaGo, there's two examples, is someone put in a huge data set of different games that have been completed at different times. And then over once that subset was taken in, the computer then looked at the information and the data that was collected from those games, so it's hundreds of thousands of games, and it gave the system the likely outcomes of what decisions should be made. So the computer didn't make its own decisions and create its own strategy. What it did was build off likely strategies from many people that have completed those games. General AI is machines that mimic human intelligence with the ability to learn and apply its intelligence to any problem. So in my opinion, although I'm always interested in being challenged, I think there's only really general AI examples of how machine learning AI is being used. And then artificial superintelligence is machines that become self-aware and surpass human intelligence. I don't know, again, I'm happy to be challenged that something has gone beyond general AI, but I don't know of any examples of something that is really artificial superintelligence, because at that point you're looking at sentient beings and you're starting to look at androids. There's been a couple that have tried to do that. Like Microsoft had an example of a chatbot that was self-learning, and it went off in its own direction and started creating neo-Nazi material that went on the internet. So I think artificial superintelligence is probably still way off.
Yeah.
Still probably that final bullet point still a matter of science fiction right
Yes.
now than the science fact.
I think there's also Amazon's recruitment bot where they thought they'd cracked recruitment, and they basically just built the most biased recruitment system ever, because it was looking at the fact that the majority of their staff were white males. So everyone was trying to hire was a white male because that fit the profile for their existing staff. I think the difference you just described there as well harks back to last week as well, the difference between test automation and automated testing. Like, you can quite easily write tests that mimic a certain task, but actually having a proper automated testing system where it's able to actually do things for itself and flag up bugs and things like that without a human telling it exactly what to do fits in nicely.
Have we had a question come in, I think, or a comment, Phil? Do we want to address that now?
Had a Q&A come in. So how do you see the recent developments in AI with the release of GPT-3? GPT-3, to be honest, I think is a new neural network. But to be honest, I haven't.
I was going to say, like, I would have to do further research if I want to.
We might have reached the realms of the panelist knowledge, but that is an exciting moment.
So I know it's a neural network. I think it's backed by Elon Musk. So it's going to have
about all I knew as well. I hadn't gone past that in terms of my knowledge, so I can't really take it further. Katya, what I would love to do actually is do a little bit more research into this, and then come back to you on LinkedIn and have a discussion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Katya, if you have any particular information that you think is relevant for it, drop it in the chat, because I'd be interested.
I'd love to discuss it, definitely.
Cool. Or maybe something for the Slack group as well. Feel free to join us there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Super. Okay, great. We'll press on then. So we've got some of the techniques here, Darren. Talk us through some of these, please.
So we'll go through the actual techniques in a minute, one by one. But these are the general techniques you think about when you think AI. So machine learning, which again is a subset of AI. Deep learning, computer vision, neural networks, as Phil touched on a second ago, natural language processing, and then artificial intelligent robots. What's that Will Smith film? That's when iRobot. That's what I think of when I think AI robots. So they kind of got to. I'll give you an example later, but they kind of got to a certain level, like the Amazon robots. But really, I still think we're a way off having actual AI robots.
Cool. So talk us through maybe the first of these, and machine learning.
Yeah,
Then.
sure. So the example that I've got up there is Spotify. So from a so essentially what's can't get words out. What machine learning is, it's like a database learning technique. So what happens is you parse data and learn from the data that can then make decisions. So Discovery Weekly is a perfect example of this. So what Spotify will do is will pay attention to what you are doing on a day-to-day basis, or the music you're listening to, and then over the week it will start parsing all that data and then look at what you can what other examples that you can give. But what it essentially is doing is, again, it's not a computer going, okay, based on the fact that you listen to, for very nerdy examples here, the fact you thought of you listened to Backstreet Boys last week, it's not saying, well, you probably would enjoy Westlife. What it's doing is taking the data of the people that have also listened to similar songs and going, okay, so you've not listened to this song before, but of the 2 million people that have listened to that Backstreet Boys song this week, they'll probably, I'm going to present this song to you because this probably will be of interest to. So that's what machine learning is doing. So it's like a predicting the outcomes from an input.
Great. So as well as getting a bit of AI recruitment knowledge, we're also getting some late 90s, early 2000s pop trivia.
Exactly.
As well.
I think late
two
90s,
specialist subjects, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think late 90s is probably fair with that.
Starting to show you age a little bit, mate. Okay. Deep learning then. This is a great example.
Yeah. So again, it's a subfield of machine learning. So what it's doing is a database learning technique. So what it does is it enables you to learn and make intelligent decisions based on using artificial neural networks. So the example here is looking at a word, and it learns from that word and gives you an example back. So it replicates structures of the brain, i.e. why we're talking about like deep learning and neural networks. So it's replicating brain inputs.
So, okay. Now this is where we maybe start getting a little bit Terminator-esque, but computer vision then.
Yeah, so I'm trying not to debunk everything that I'm putting into this in terms of that it doesn't exist, but computer vision is something that is probably the closest to being a thing. So computer vision, I guess a good example of computer vision is like you'll see on this picture, where it's looking at an image and it's deciding what is the likely products from that image. So a good example of this would be the person on there. So it's looking at the makeup of that body and going, okay, that's a person. But it's not doing it from the position of looking at that actual object. What it's doing is looking at huge data points. So it's looking at millions of data points to make a decision about what is that object. It's not just looking at the actual image and going, okay, I can see that as a person.
Cool. Okay. And then NLP, I'm always keen to stress that this is natural language processing rather than the neuro-linguistic programming, which I think is the mind control trick. But
yeah.
Talk us through this version of NLP, Darren.
Yeah, so what NLP is doing, it gives the machines the ability to read, understand, and derive meaning from human language. So we all know that human language is incredibly complex. So within it, you've got syntax, so what is grammatically correct. You've got semantics about what is the meaning within that word. And you've got pragmatics, which is what is the purpose or goal from that. So there's kind of two broad approaches to it. There's rule-based, which focuses on pattern matching. So looks at what is the pattern within that wording. And again, looking back at patterns that it's seen before, and then it's looking at cognitive. So understanding the meaning behind the words, which again goes back to that kind of deep learning. So it will look at, okay, what can I understand from that? So as you'll see on the above, what we're kind of looking at there is the Amazon Comprehend medical. So what it will do is look at the medical record and then make a decision based on what you can see there. So it's learning from previous patterns in a language perspective.
And then as we get into neural networks, we start getting a little bit more technical.
Oh, yeah, we're getting more and more technical as we go. So what are neural networks? So neural networks are essentially a set of algorithms, and they're modeled loosely around the human brain, and they're designed to recognize patterns from that. So what they do is they interpret sensory data through a kind of like machine perception, and then they use labeling or clustering of raw input from it. So here you're really getting into real machine learning aspects.
Okay. And finally, I think where people's, generally their mind jumps to when they talk about AI and robots.
Yeah.
Talk to this one.
Yeah, so there are examples of AI robots. When I was walking around New York about 18 months ago, there was a little robot that was going through, it was actually going through Times Square, which I found mental because I don't know how it didn't get stepped on. But what they're doing is delivering information, delivering like groceries or products to consumers. But traditionally, AI robots are somewhat constrained by user cases. So what they need is exact functionality to be input into them. So a good example of something that we would consider to be AI, but really there's input put into it. It's like a Rumba, one of these Rumba vacuum cleaners. Because from our side, when we look at it, we think, wow, it's amazing that I can just turn it on and it will figure its way around and start vacuuming for me. But really it's learning from inputs that put into it. So the input is maybe not even human, it's collision input. So what the Rumble will do is it will bounce off surfaces and realize over time, okay, I'm going to create an image internally in my brain or in my system is probably the better way to put it, of what is the layout of this room. And over time, it will mean that unless you completely change the way that your room is set up, it will go around the room and just assume that nothing has changed, and it will start vacuuming with the knowledge of, if I go an extra foot, I'm going to bump into a wall, so I won't go that way. I'll go right or left to avoid that.
Okay. So as we delve a little bit details, let's deconstruct some of this tech then. So talk us through some of the popular AI tools and the libraries that some of our candidates are going to be likely using on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So I actually chose Azure machine learning because I was AWS comes up on everything, GCP comes up on a little bit less. Azure is the little demon child of cloud a lot of time that people don't really talk about Azure very often. But so Azure machine learning is something that all the different systems have an example of a very similar system. But what Azure machine learning is, it's a cloud-based service which provides tools for deploying predictive models as analytical solutions. So it can be used to test machine learning modules, algorithms, and create recommender systems. So really, really complex, but it's a part of the Azure ecosystem that's been built in the last few years. And they've got Cafe, which is an open source framework, and it's used for image classification. So it comes back to that computer vision systems, i.e. why I was really keen to make sure that we go through the different techniques, because it helps you understand where you might utilize these different tools. And then you've got Deep Learning 4J, which is an open source distributed deep learning library, and it's mainly used with JVM languages. So the focus of a lot of these tools is on the Python side. This one can be used in Java as well, so it's really popular in Java and Scala. IBM Watson, so oftentimes it's called the question answering machine because of what it did with Jeopardy. But it's it uses analytical powers and artificial intelligence to replicate human-like abilities. So it can answer questions based on input or previous inputs into the system. You've got Keras, which is a open source neural network. It's written in Python. So if you are looking at Python AI engineers, or oftentimes you'll see that on profiles. And you've got Skitic Learn, which is an open source machine learning framework for Python. Really useful for data mining and data analysis. and also for data visualization. I'm sure everyone knows what data visualization is, but think of data visualization as the ability to utilize data in a more visual way. So being able to present something back to stakeholders who may not necessarily understand the data. And then you've got TensorFlow. Most people will be aware of TensorFlow. It tends to be the one that you will see most on profiles. But TensorFlow is a semi-open source library. So it allows developers to perform really complex numerical computations.
Cool. I don't know about you, Phil. I've been looking up GPT-3, and it's part of the Open AI product or project. I don't know if you've got comments to that. But otherwise, we'll let Darren press on with.
So if you want to take that for a second, I'm as interested as the audience, so feel free to.
Anything to add on that, Phil? Or otherwise, I'm going to keep on reading the Wikipedia page.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were coming out with something.
No, yeah. So
I'm
I'm still trying to research as we go. But if you'd glean anything, but yeah, it's part of the Elon Musk OpenAI project. I don't think I've got any wisdom to glean as far, so we might let Darren press on.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, and so let's look at some of the skills and tools that our accountants can be using on a day-to-day basis then.
So what I wanted to do here was look at the kind of backgrounds you might see people from. So AI engineers, like I say, or AI is a subset of computer science. So you might find them from two different backgrounds. So you might see them from a software engineering background. So I'm not going to go through the responsibilities as a software engineer because I'm sure everyone on the call knows. But you also might see them from a theoretical kind of background. So similar to a traditional data scientist, a lot of the time these people will come from like a biology or a physics type background. So the most important thing I would say when looking at AI engineers is understanding what background they come from and understanding where their skill set lays. Because like with a lot of technology, and I think we as an industry or as tech industry in general have created a bit of a monster where you can't really ever go off of job titles. It's so much more important to look at the responsibilities. So what are these people doing with AI? Because if someone's calls themselves an AI engineer, as I showed with all the different techniques, there's so much more to it. Are they involved in neural networks? Are they involved in machine learning, which is, to be honest, when people say AI is usually what people are talking about. People are talking about machine learning. But are they also involved in natural language processing? So what are they doing with that? And what tasks are you looking for them to do in your organization? Because that's going to be the most important thing to understand whether they're going to be the right AI engineer for you, not just that they've listed AI engineer as a title.
Cool. And so I think with a few of the roles we've looked for in the last few weeks, quite a broad church, and there's quite a few niches within niches that we need to be aware of when we're interviewing or hiring these types of candidates. Cool. So then we get to the exciting bit. Talk us through the experience and salaries.
Just noticed this time we are getting through this in some speed. So from an AI engineer salary perspective, it's as can be expected, to be honest. As you'll see back in 2006, where if we go back to the slide previously, where we look at where AI was back in 2006, we were still a little bit in the winter, where the internet boom had taken place, but really not a lot had changed from an AI perspective. We were still looking at the same AI as we were probably back in the early 2000s. So over time, you see a little bit of a dip, but overall, you'll see that 10 to 90th percentile range has gone up. So as you'll see from kind of 2019 to 2020, there's been a huge spike in kind of AI engineering as a kind of salary skill set. I think that the median is a little bit generous on kind of where I see things, but oftentimes, again, it depends on what kind of AI engineer are they. So I think it's such a wide berth of skills that really, if you're looking for that unicorn, you probably are going to pay upwards of 120, 130. But if you're looking for someone that has delved into different areas, then probably you're looking down to more towards that 70, 80, 90 range. So it really depends on what you're kind of looking for. There are candidates that will be looking for that 160, but feel free to disagree with me. But those are the kind of candidates that you probably will never see come out of the NASA's or the Palantirs or the Facebooks. So there'll be candidates that are doing the speeches at these events, that are people that are everyone's aspiring to get, but really they are so ingrained into their businesses that you will never see them out in the market. So I think the median for the actual market is more around that 70 to 100K.
And a similar sort of story that we've seen with disciplines like DevOps and some of the other data engineering. So that sort of correlation is there. I think maybe the other thing to add is like those low salaries at the beginning of the century may reflect more concentration in the academic or research areas. And then we've seen this explosion of coming into the private sector, and more valuable use cases emerge. And that's what's seen that that rise in the salaries.
Yeah, well, if you look at AI back in, it's more mine and Phil's childhood, if I'm honest, Dale. But in our childhood, we would have seen those like Sony dogs in Tokyo. So like that was about as good as AI got at that point. Whereas in the last few years, you've seen the machines that are going around for Amazon. You've seen that Uber are moving towards trying to get automated cars, which is AI related. So it's been with the uptake of all these different things that it's starting to be allowed. I think what is really going to take AI off in a big direction is if stuff like those automated cars really becomes mainstream. I personally, I probably wouldn't be that comfortable with a chitty chitty bang bang kind of level where we're suddenly getting cars drive for us. Pulling out all the references here today. But that's what will change. It's going to be the mainstream uptake in a lot of these technologies that's going to force that median to go up at this point. I think the technology is there to get us to a certain level. It's going to be down to consumer interest now.
Well, I think you already see that. If you look at, I know apps have been around a little bit longer than that, but really like when all phones became super app focused and even desktops became app focused and things like that, it is early 2010s. Obviously, the more people using apps, the more data that's generated. Then you have the advances in cloud computing and real-time streaming, so you can pull that data in. Like in the last 10 years, it'd be interesting to know how many data points have been generated in the last 10 years compared to the previous 100 years or something from an IT perspective, because it would dwarf it massively. So there is just a hell of a lot more data out there now to be analysed and to extract meaning from.
Yeah, and I this is less related to AI, but just shows where technology is gone. Again, I might have made this up. I'm pretty sure this is right. There was as much information on a floppy disk, or like a modern floppy disk, than there was on what launched the rocket to the moon. So like that shows how far technology is come in just half a century.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, so I think from that 2000 or 2005, we've seen that sort of what you might call that Cambrian explosion. So all these different disciplines appearing and then evolving. So is it fair to say we think we'd see that median creep up over the next 5 years, but also the breadth, so that top 25% and the top 10% to get broader as well?
So I would expect that the 25 to 75 percentile will probably catch up, which will then force that median to catch up. I think
that range will also get broader as well, we think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think right now it's you see that spike and it looks a little bit terrifying. It's a bit hard to understand why that's happened, but some of the stuff that people threw into the chat already is the reason this is happening at the moment. So I think there is an interest. It's just whether everyone will follow that interest.
Cool. Do we have anything to pick up from the Q&A or chat, guys? Okay, so then talk us through, our perennial question about diversity.
Yeah, so average salary kind of goes with what I said on the median, that I expected it would be a little bit lower, but it's kind of the same. So this data is taken from pay scale, just so everyone knows that I'm not picking it out of thin air. Go shout at them if you think this isn't really aligned. Again, as always, I think the bonus is a little bit lower than I expect. And for most of the clients we work with, 10% bonus is about what we see as being the norm, and that's like a standard bonus. I think what's interesting is that although this is still not where I would like to see male versus female, compared to other areas we've spoken about in the last few weeks, females do tend to have more of a stake in the AI engineering market. So 22%, just less than 1 in 4 AI engineers are female. I think we'll see this creep up over time. There's some amazing initiatives. I was speaking to a consultancy this morning, a data consultancy, and they were talking to me about some of the projects they're involved with at the moment. They're looking at underrepresented areas, and there was a big focus with them on the gender diversity. So I think that over time we'll see this creep. It will take a long time to get to 50%, but I think we'll see this creep up over time compared to other areas that you can see that there are representation in AI, whereas in something like DevOps, it's very hard to see who are the women that I should aspire to be. Like, I'm not saying that they're not out there, but they're more prevalent in AI than they are in other areas.
Yeah, about double the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's exactly double. And what I'm going to do is after this, I will share in the Slack group a really, really interesting video that I watched last night, which was one of the authors of an AI book, talking about where are we actually at this moment in time, which kind of led to some of the debunkings that I went through at the start, if I'm honest.
And I think the fact that it's a newer discipline, I think probably has bearing on the male-female split. Like, we do see, like, unlike I think DevOps, we do see kind of data science focused grad schemes where they're taking people directly from university, whereas with DevOps you're typically looking at an existing pool of primarily male candidates from software engineering or sysadmin backgrounds. I think it'd be interesting to see if it's a trend that carries over into kind of across all data science and data engineering. But yeah, possibly with it being such a new discipline, then it's had the benefit of getting more women into STEM subjects and things like that at university.
Yeah. I think we might be at the end, which is terrifying. I was expecting more questions to come up.
Through today, so we're getting pithier and pithier as we get towards.
Yeah, I was going to say right at the end, we've got really, really quick in getting through topics.
So we're getting more and more pithy and concise as we get through the series.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Sorry, there is one more.
Yeah, as I say, I think we've got one more. Maybe just gives you an idea of like how many of these candidates are out there.
Yeah. So I was really interested in making sure that we went with AI engineer rather than data scientist, because AI, as I've said several times, is a subset of data science. So AI to me is to computer science and to data science what like algebra is within maths. Like, it's a very small subset that within that market. So when you hear AI engineers, really look for AI engineers. Don't look for data scientists. So if you look at the availability in the UK, these are the 4 languages that are most prevalent when I look for engineers. So you kind of work out yourself, but it's 1/8 of 1/9 of the size of PHP, which is, I'm working out maths in my head, which is it's a quarter of what C# is. So suddenly, if you look at that, suddenly the AI engineers are 36th of the size market that C# is. So it's going to evolve as time goes on and companies are more interested in AI. It's going to involve people being upskilled. I know that there's Vodafone were very, very good a couple of years ago at looking at their team and upskilling people from one area to another. We're talking to them at the moment about, and I've actually seen someone that moved into that AI team and has come back out into software engineering. But I think that's what is going to be the big win for companies, is finding people in your software engineering team that have the fundamentals, that are interested then at taking on this berth and moving into that area.
Super.
Yeah, agreed.
Anything to add on this about where we're finding candidates for AI engineer jobs?
So, to be honest, we've got probably more focused on broader data scientists at the moment. I would say don't have too much focus on AI engineers. I think, as with all of this, I think we've touched on it every time. It is about looking at responsibilities and not job titles. But yeah, I think beyond that, nothing specific to AI engineers. But yeah, just to echo what Darren says, like, what does your business need? What specific tasks do they need to perform? Because it'll be similar to DevOps in that while AI engineers are their own specific discipline, what they're titled will very much depend on the company they work for, and there'll be all sorts of weird and wonderful names for them. So it's absolutely about boiling it down to the responsibilities and what you need when you're looking for a particular candidate.
It may be that if your spec might come through labeled as an AI engineer, but you might find some great people under the titles of data scientists or similar type roles.
And I think right now, like, there's not enough AI tasks, like true AI tasks, that are involved in the majority of businesses. There's a few businesses that maybe are the exceptions to the rule, but there's not so many AI tasks being utilized at the moment within organizations to need a full AI function. So you might have someone in the company who is focused on those tasks, but the fact that there's only 8,000 true AI engineers in the UK at the moment gives you a bit of a summary of the fact that most companies don't actually have someone focusing purely on those AI tasks.
Interesting. Okay. I don't think we've had any more comments or questions come in, unless I've missed them. Unless we've got more to add there, I will give maybe people a second to get their question in, but otherwise we'll probably be almost ready to wrap. Anything else from you, Phil, this week? I don't know, have you found anything on our GPT-3?
No, so I think definitely a bit of a hiatus. I think we've gone very in depth on a lot of the kind of big topics that we covered in TRT Series 1. Then we've gone in and broke down those specs into a little bit more detail, which has been interesting. But I think for the next series, it'd be interesting to get some feedback from the listeners and see, what is it that they would perhaps like to look into. I think we will come back towards the end of the year, potentially looking at kind of a review of 2020 and kind of give some people some insight into what they can expect in 2021. But yeah, very, very much open to feedback. It'd be great to kind of hear from people what it is they would like to see next. And yeah, I think we'll get on with that towards the end of the year.
Cool. So I may have spoken too soon, but we have had a question coming on the chat.
Yeah, I saw the one about data science. What's the advantages and disadvantages of having an AI engineering team? So the advantages, I guess, is that they can focus on the actual AI tasks, whereas a data scientist will focus on. So a data scientist a lot of time is focused on gathering the data that comes from your system. So they're not necessarily focusing on how can this system learn from what's been input into it. A lot of time they are looking at what has happened before and predicting the future themselves, rather than getting the computer to predict those futures. But as time goes on, I think more of those tasks will be data science focused. But the advantage of having, the disadvantages of having an AI engineer is that it's very, very expensive. As you would have seen from that median, if you're going to get someone that is focused completely on neural networks and natural language processing and deep learning, do you have enough tasks in your organization to make it worth the while? You're going to be paying these people probably somewhere in the region of, if you include the cost of having them there, because there's costs outside of salary, somewhere in the region of 90K. So do you have enough tasks that are going to be going on in a 365 days a year basis, taking out a holiday, to keep them active? Or would you be better having a data scientist that does some of these AI tasks and you're upskilling to utilize some of these AI tasks, but is also doing a lot more of these like predictive models as well?
Yeah. There's maybe a question of how deep and how specialized you
exactly. Do you need
be.
someone that specialized at the moment?
Yeah, and I think it's not just a case of just hire them and then great, there we go, that off they go, they can start creating some lovely artificial intelligence for you. Depends how well your data is already mapped out.
Yep.
So you might, they might spend 3 to 6 months just mapping out data at first to make sure that the training data for the artificial intelligence is going to be good enough. So it could be quite a while before you even see any results. There's then bringing on new tools. So it's not just the expense of the salary, like it's potentially quite a time consuming and quite expensive process before you get to the point where you're going to see results. So I think that is why typically we're seeing them in much bigger companies that tend to have that pot of cash they can afford to invest for the future. And more importantly, they've got hundreds of thousands of data points generated every day. So the benefits they're going to see from automating the analysis and all of that process is going to be huge. If you're a smaller company where your data isn't quite that big, like Darren says, you can probably handle it with a more traditional data scientist being on top of it.
Yep, I agree.
Cool, nice answer, guys. So I think that rounds us pretty well. I'll keep a quick eye on the QA or chat, but thanks for the questions today, guys. They've been great. Otherwise, I think we're ready to wrap, guys. So thanks. Very sort of bittersweet moment. We're coming to the end of the series, but thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember, you can watch on catch up on all the YouTube channels and videos there for us. And so we'd love to get your feedback to what you might want to see in future episodes and future series. So keep us posted. But otherwise, we'll wrap there. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.